Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Conservative Corner. I'm Elliot Margolis. I'm here with my co-host Gail Burke, and today we want to talk about the upcoming election. You've heard of that. But I want you to think about something first. If you cross the North Korean border illegally, you get 12 years of hard labor. If you cross the Iranian border illegally, you are detained indefinitely. If you cross the Afghan border illegally, you get shot. If you cross the Saudi Arabian border illegally, you'll be jailed. If you cross the Chinese border illegally, you may never be heard from again. If you cross the Venezuelan border illegally, you will be branded a spy and your fate will be sealed. If you cross the Cuban border illegally, you will be thrown into a political prison to rot. If you cross the United States border illegally, you get a job, you get a driver's license, get a Social Security card, you get welfare, get food stamps, get credit cards, subsidized rent or a loan to buy a house, free education, free health care, a lobbyist in Washington, billions of dollars worth of public documents printed in your language, and you get the right to carry a country's flag while protesting that you don't get enough respect. Now, who's paying for that? You are. So when you vote, remember that. It's very important that you remember you are not only paying for your cell phone, you're paying for illegal cell phones. You're not only paying for your health care, you're paying for the illegals' health care. If somebody is driving a car and hits you and they're an illegal alien, they don't have insurance. But that's okay. In Massachusetts, we're welcoming illegals because the Democrats control Massachusetts, and therefore they want the illegals to come in, and they want to spend your money on the illegals.
Well, that just leads us into question number 4 on the ballot. Even though the question was not printed in the red book that Bill Galvin sent out to everyone, the question 4 is on the ballot. And what it is the legislature voted to allow illegal aliens to get driver's licenses. The question on the ballot could be very misleading because the vote will be to repeal question number 4, but if you want to repeal it, you have to vote no on question number 4. The responsibility for screening these illegals is left up to the registry. The registry has no expertise or experience or anything to screen anyone. The illegals can go to the registry. Sometimes they're not even given a road test. If they pass the questions, they are given a license, and the Democrats in Massachusetts say, well, now we will make sure that these drivers have insurance. There's no mandate that they have to get insurance. They're here illegally anyway. They're breaking the law. Why should they bother to pay for insurance?
And keep in mind on this question, when Galvin didn't put it in that book, the question, the information on the question, the signatures were in time to be in the book. If they weren't in time, they wouldn't be on the ballot. So you've got Galvin, corrupt. You've got Maura Healey, who's running for your governor, corrupt. She's the Attorney General now. She never would have let that happen. You've got the Democratic politicians who allowed this activity not to go on the ballot in that questionnaire or the information because they didn't want you to to know that that was on the ballot. They don't want you to vote to eliminate driver's licenses for illegals, because once you have a driver's license, guess what? You'll be able to vote. And
right.
that's criminal activity on the part of Maura Healey, Bill Galvin, and the Democratic Party. And you need to hold them responsible for that.
Well, the question is premised by saying our roads will be safer. How can our roads be safer if you have people who are breaking our laws behind the wheel? Many, or most of them, don't even speak English. How are they going to read road signs? How are they going to know where to go? That's not making our roads safer. That's making them worse. And as a friend of mine recently said, what are we going to do? Are we going to put the road signs in 20 different languages so that they will understand it? Who pays for that? That's ridiculous. So, moving on. Let's talk about one of the races that's being contested here in Massachusetts. And it pits Seth Moulton against newcomer Robert May. For some reason, and seems to be becoming a Democrat ploy, Seth Moulton will not debate Robert May. And his reasoning is because Robert May disagreed with the 2020 election results. So therefore, Moulton will not debate him. What kind of a silly excuse is that to not let the people that are going to be voting not have the debate so you can each view your own opinions?
But Gail, if you remember correctly, and I'm sure you do, Seth Moulton wanted to debate John Tierney to become the Democratic nominee for Congress a number of years ago, because Tierney was the incumbent, and Seth Moulton wanted to get some publicity. Tierney gave him that.
Yeah.
Okay? But Seth Moulton doesn't want you to know how he stands on the issues, because he knows he's wrong on the issues. I called Seth Moulton's office a couple of weeks ago. One of the things they told me was that the border is more secure now than it was under Donald Trump. I mean,
Well, that's the Democrat talking points. They're all saying
Yeah.
it, and the media allows them. They agree with them.
absolutely the media allows it. But Seth Moulton is afraid to debate because of the economy, the inflation, the border. I mean, he would never say in public the border is more secure now, because he thinks you're stupid. He thinks you don't know what's going on down at the border.
Well, one of the questions that a member of the audience had in a recent, I guess it was like a town hall kind of meeting that Seth Moulton had, and a woman from Peabody was asking him about his voting record. And Moulton describes himself as being bipartisan. Well, this Peabody resident says he begged to differ with Moulton, telling him he voted with the Democrats and President Biden roughly 90% of the time. He said, I have not seen you criticize the president or what he has done to the country. You voted consistently with him for whatever he proposed. And a lot of people are very unhappy. Moulton's response was that he criticized the president on Fox News earlier in the day because he didn't believe the country is moving fast enough to address the threat of China in the Pacific. Okay, he criticized the president once. He dropped the ball. The president has made numerous errors in his presidency. And in less than 2 years, we are a mess. We're behind the 8 ball in almost every area. So a tiny little criticism of the president once isn't going to cut it, Seth. You have to go on your record, and people are aware of what your record is.
You know, the press is an interesting thing. Number one, they're not doing their job. Do you know that Joe Biden has never lied to you? You know that? Because Donald Trump lied to you probably 400 times a day, but Biden not. But you know what Biden said the other day? He said, this is a great one. He said he was having a talk with the person who invented insulin. The only problem with that discussion is that the person who invented the insulin died before Biden was even born. But you don't even hear about that in the press.
Well, you know, that brings up another topic about this bill that was passed by the Democrats, the IRA. And part of that bill, which was a good thing, was to force pharmaceutical companies to drop their prices. And one of the the drugs that they will be dropping their prices on very soon was insulin. However, the other drugs, most of the other drugs, that doesn't go into effect for 3 years. So in the meantime, the Democrats are running on the record that they helped drop pharmaceutical prices. It doesn't go into effect. 3 more years of paying these outrageous prices.
But you know that under the Trump administration, Trump tried to get that done.
That's right.
Okay? But the Democrats decided, well, if Trump gets it done, he gets credit for it.
Yeah.
We don't want him to get credit for it, so the Democrats stopped that from happening. See, it's time that the politicians now work for you and me and not for the party. That's the real problem. I don't care who gets credit for doing something good for us. Good for them. But to hold it off just because they don't want a political party to get credit for something, that's treasonous. And
It is. It's
you know,
terrible.
that's what happened with Trump. They didn't like Trump because Trump was trying to drain the swamp. And let me ask you, how does a guy like Biden making $170,000 a year become a billionaire? Okay? It doesn't happen.
But
Okay?
it does happen in Washington, D.C.
Well, but only if you're corrupt.
Well, that's the swamp. And the swamp continues. And it's very interesting if you listen to the Democrats and then you take what they say and you do a little research on it. And believe me, you need to do your research because everything that the Democrats are telling you that's bad about the Republicans is exactly what they've been doing and what they continue to do. So you can apply that to almost any topic you can think of. Crime is a good example. Through the summer of 2020, remember all the violence, the shootings, the burning of buildings, the beating up of cops, and the murder of cops? The Democrats would have you believe that's all done by those white supremacists. Well, what is a white supremacist? I still don't know anybody who can actually define it other than to say it's a Trump supporter.
But if it was done by the white supremacists, why weren't they arrested? Okay? Why did they allow the damage to continue if it was done by white supremacists? Why were all these riots in democratically run cities? Okay?
Even a small town like Kenosha, Wisconsin. Look what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, all by, but nobody, this is a good one. Okay, in San Francisco, you had the situation with Paul Pelosi. Why is the attacker from Paul Pelosi in jail. I thought you could get away without any,
No cash bail. Yeah.
no bail, no nothing. But according to the Democrats, they're more important than you are. So therefore, Paul Pelosi's attacker should be in jail, but the attacker for you, no, they can be let
No.
free. No problem whatsoever. You got to think about this thing when you're voting. Let's just talk a little more about, like the John in Pennsylvania, Fetterman and Oz.
All right.
Okay? Fetterman refused to debate Oz until last week. Early voting started 3 weeks ago in Pennsylvania. Okay? Another tactic of the Democrats. They know how bad Fetterman is, but in order to protect him, they allowed the early voting, 3 weeks before the election, and then, they had the debate after thousands of people already voted.
Well, there are so many questions about that too, because I think it's the same thing about Biden. Why did their wives support their need to run? They're obviously, Biden is totally out of it. He almost fell off a stage 2 days ago when he was making an appearance, and Carmela almost had to pull him back from hurting himself. And Fetterman's wife goes along with what Fetterman's doing when it's very obvious. And it's obvious why he didn't want to debate, is because he has cognitive problems. It's sad. It's sad that the president has them too. But these people are going to be put in positions of power. Look at the president. Look at being a United States senator. And you have to get up on the floor. You have to speak to your counterparts. You have to argue. Fetterman obviously isn't capable of doing that, and yet the media protects him. The media protects Biden every time Biden goes out. And keep in mind that during this whole election season, most Democrats didn't want anything to do with Biden. That's how little they think of him and his policies. But he goes out there and he sticks his foot in his mouth every time. Well, some people think it's funny. I don't think it's funny at all. I don't think he should be out there. He's the leader of the free world, supposedly, and yet someone's making really horrible decisions, and he goes out there and touts them. He not only does that, but he goes out there and he criticizes half the country, the people that voted for Trump and others. He calls them white supremacists. He calls them terrorists. This is the president speaking. You don't do that sort of thing to your own people. You just don't. And that's a failure on the part of the Democrat Party.
Well, but to be fair, the Republicans do a lot of the same things. And, both parties work for the party instead of the people. And that's a real problem. But what we're seeing now is the Democrats are just trying to hijack this election. Hillary Clinton said that the Republicans could destroy our democracy. Not one person from the press asked the most important question: how? Okay? The press is part of the problem right now. The press is not being objective. The press, like I said before, how many times did the press tell you Trump lied and yet Biden hasn't lied yet? Okay? How many times did the press try and condemn Trump's kids for whatever they did, but the Biden kids, nobody touches them. They're protecting the Democrats. Why? Why is the press doing that?
Because the press is complicit in what has been going on.
That's the problem.
And especially when you mentioned the Biden family, Hunter Biden, all that information on his the book that came out was The Laptop from Hell. All that information that came out was suppressed by the media because it might have hurt Joe Biden's chances of becoming president, and that's why they did it. The FBI was complicit in it. Other federal organizations, they worked together to keep that away from being widely known. And now what's happening? It's coming out now, and hopefully with new people in government, we can get the DOJ to stop protecting criminals. And to my mind, and to my way of thinking, that's what Hunter Biden is. For what he did, what he was allowed to do, and the FBI was totally involved in that, apparently, because whistleblowers from the FBI have come forward and said that.
You know, some of the Democrats are saying the Republicans are election deniers. Well, Stacey Abrams still hasn't conceded her election 4 years ago, or 2 years, or whenever it was.
4 years.
4 years ago in Georgia.
She thinks
okay?
she's
Hillary Clinton
governor.
still complains about the fact that it was not a legal loss on her part.
No, he was an illegitimate
But
president.
they're not election deniers?
Yeah.
And where is the press showing you this? It's not a function of whether or not there's election deniers. It's a function of it's not just Republicans, okay? It's Democrats as well. But they don't want you to know that.
Well, you know, it's interesting when you look at the Biden cabinet, and when you look at, first of all, the vice president, who doesn't have a clue when she goes on these stumps, and she doesn't go where she should be going. After all, she's been to the border once, but she wasn't in an area that was suffering from hundreds of thousands of migrants coming over. She stayed away from that. You have a Secretary of Transportation who doesn't have a clue about what his job is. Look at the diesel fuel. We supposedly, it's been reported that we have maybe 22 days left of diesel fuel for the entire country. What will happen if that continues? Because this president and his cabinet have decided that, no, we're not going to have fracking. We're closing down the pipelines. We're going to have to buy our oil from Saudi Arabia, from Venezuela. Wait a minute, Venezuela has the dirtiest oil on the planet. Saudi Arabia has said, no, we're not going to pump in more gas that you're telling us that we need to do. We have hundreds of years, remember that, hundreds of years of oil, gas, and other natural resources that we can get out of the ground. What is it about Biden and his band of
Idiots. But
that they won't? They keep saying that they have leases, and the oil companies won't purchase them. Well, why should they purchase leases when he keeps telling them we're going to get rid of fossil fuels? That's like shooting yourself in the foot.
And keep in mind, yeah, it's okay to have electric cars, but what the federal government is doing is saying, if you buy an electric car, we're going to give you a huge tax break. Who is paying for the tax break? You are.
And how
Okay?
much is the tax break?
And-
$6,000, $7,000?
It's a lot of money.
In a car,
But-
an electric car is almost $70,000.
But if a car company says, well, listen, they're going to get this big tax break, maybe we should increase the price of the car. So who's making the money? The car companies are making the money.
And the
And the most
government.
important thing is we don't have the infrastructure to take care of electric cars. You know, there's some people that can't, I mean, in my job, I can't have an electric car. It's real simple. It's not going to work for me. But did you know that electric cars weigh 1,000 pounds more than a regular car?
Well, it's the battery.
Yeah,
that
it's
puts
the
weight on
battery,
that.
and because of that, that hurts the roads.
Well, I don't know, very few media outlets are reporting that during the hurricane down in Florida, there were people who owned electric cars that were catching on fire because the water came over the cars and there's something in the batteries that ignites it. And this has happened in other places as well. So the research on electric cars is far from over. And, and they want to put them into school buses. Now, there's a couple of places where the school buses were held in a garage and they actually blew up.
I mean, we need some electric cars. I'm not saying we shouldn't have
At
it,
some point, yeah.
but we need to build the infrastructure for it. We need to improve them first, and, it's a gradual thing. If the United States decides they're going to be 100% green, and no other country in the world is, it doesn't do us any good.
Well, the
If your
Europeans-
friend John Kerry, not only does he fly all over the world in his, but that's okay.
Leaving a huge carbon footprint.
Leaving a huge, but what has he done? Has he convinced any other country to get a little more conservative on the using fuel or throwing rubbish in the ocean? He's done nothing. He's accomplished nothing.
Well, even some European countries, such as Germany, got rid of their nuclear. They were going green big time, and now they're finding, because it's getting colder, they don't have enough energy sources. So they're going back to coal. And other European countries are starting to do the same thing, coal and oil, but especially coal. Now, coal does not burn as clean as oil or gas.
But if you remember when Obama was president, we had clean coal burning,
That's right.
okay?
do.
But that's because he was a Democrat and he needed to do what he needed to do to get votes.
Yeah.
So it was clean coal burning then, but not now.
No. And this is especially important in a place like Pennsylvania, which is a highly contested race, as Elliot mentioned, between Fetterman and Dr. Oz, where fracking was a big issue, and Biden cut that out. And Fetterman lied when he was debating Dr. Oz because he said he's always been in favor of fracking. Well, a couple of years ago, and these Democrats are so stupid. I have to say stupid, because do they not realize that these things are all on tape? They're all on video. You can go back and see. And what Fetterman said a couple of years ago was he was totally against fracking. So the Democrats, I think the reason they do things like this is because they think we're stupid and we won't remember things. But I have news for you. We are beginning to remember more and more, and we have proof that these things went on. So, with that, we will end our show. We wanted to get this out today. We hope it gets to you before Election Day. I think it will, because there are a lot of tiny little loose ends that we need to think about, and we need to carefully screen who it is we're voting for, especially in Massachusetts, but around the country as well. So be careful. Make sure you do your homework before you go to the polls. Question 4, very important. Question 1, 2, and 3 are also important. But read both sides before you make a decision on how to vote. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.